It's my great pleasure to welcome Omid Nouripour, who in this crowd probably does not need much of an introduction. He has served in the Bundestag since 2006, and he has served as his party's Alliance 90 and the Greens co-chair since January of this year. He is his party's spokesperson on foreign policy issues and serves on the Committee on Foreign Affairs and also on the Finance Committee. And he is going to speak with us briefly, make some opening remarks, and then he and I will have a very brief conversation before the Defense Minister arrives. So, Omid, with that, let me welcome you to the stage and to the podium, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much for having me. They want me to first deliver a speech for hiding my sneakers here. I had to run over to try not to replace, but to bring the very warm greetings of our Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, who can't be with us today, unfortunately, but the message she would deliver is our mutual one. This is that this crisis is a huge opportunity, not only a huge tragedy, not only for the people of Ukraine, but also a huge opportunity to bring us together as democracies more and closer than ever before. And obviously, people of Ukraine are bravely fighting not only for their sovereignty, for their freedom, but also for our democracy and for our freedom. This is why they deserve any support we can give. And yes, it's obviously necessary to support them properly, because we know that if Ukraine could fall, and there are a lot of reasons to believe that the escalation would increase even in the next weeks, if they are not able to win this war, obviously it's not our choice if the next battle is going to be about Kazakhstan, about Moldova, about Georgia, or even about NATO territory. And this is why we have, and this is what my government is working on massively to accelerate, not only improve, but also accelerate our support for the Ukrainian people in these days. The systemic rivalry we are seeing is, of course, not only about Russia. Everybody knows that the big deal at the end of the day is the systemic rivalry with China, and everybody knows that we cannot exclude a next escalation in the Strait of Taiwan with all of the massive impacts would have for our security, for geostrategy, and also for our economy. And this is why it's important to stand together against the rule breakers of this planet. This is, of course, about the democracies coming together, having alliances, having deeper cooperation, but definitely it's about all of the countries, all about the players who are ready to stick to the rules. And this is what is the hugest difference between us on one side and the autocracies on the other side. And this is why it's obviously necessary to come together to tackle these huge challenges. It's about a pandemic, of course. It's about the question of inflation. We see that the fossil inflation it's not only a fossil inflation, there are many reasons for the inflation, but we see that there is absolutely necessary to have better and deeper cooperation in the economy, and of course talking about how we can tackle what we are seeing, what is coming. It's about exchanging our experience with all of this hybrid warfare we're seeing against our democracies. I think we in Germany could learn a lot about the assault on American democracy we saw for the last years to adopt and to prevent such a situation in our country. And of course, we can and could and should learn a lot more from countries like Ukraine, the way they are attacked hybridly for the last 8 years. And at the end of the day, of course, any systemic rivalry in the history of mankind always has been decided by technology. And this is a very, maybe I wouldn't say a last moment, a very crucial moment for not only my country, but democracies in Europe, from Ukraine to Portugal, and of course the United States and Canada, to come together and talk about technology cooperation the way we never had before. It's more than obvious that this is the major battlefield with China for the next years. It's more than obvious that it's about the rules and the standards which had to be set now for the next decades. You may know that the International Standards Organization is now completely filled with a lot of staffers from China who are arguing for their standards, not for our standards. And when we talk about telecommunication, for example, it's absolutely necessary to get together, to come together, and to stand together against this kind of standards, which are, at the end of the day, a huge measure of power for countries like China, and especially for this country. This is why it's absolutely necessary and absolutely correct to talk about a new era of cooperation between the United States and Europe, and especially between the United States and Germany. And this is why the title of this conference is the right one. I'm very grateful that I can stand here and have that can give a speech and listen to the debate here, which is absolutely necessary and fantastic to hear. It's a great opportunity to learn a lot here. But to be honest, there is one more benefit for myself. A lot of people who sit here are members of the Atlantic Bridge, and tomorrow you have the opportunity to vote the next board, and I'm one of the candidates. Please vote for me. Thank you very much for your attention.
I did not realize that this was going to be a campaign event. Omid, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for squeezing this into your schedule. Thank you for bringing greetings from the foreign minister, but also for raising the issue of systemic rivalry. We've talked about it on and off during the course of the day today, but I think that you really sort of brought it to a point. And I have a ton of questions for you, but I will try to limit myself to one or two. And one of my questions is, certainly in the US, there was a sense that with the Greens in this government, there would be a more hawkish position on Russia and on China. And of course, with the conflict in Ukraine, with Russia's war in Ukraine, we've seen a sea change in German policy toward Russia. Can you talk to us a little bit about how the policy toward China is changing at the moment?
First, my party always has been completely navigated by human rights. Not completely, but mainly. And of course, this is why it was easier for us to argue against Putin and, for example, against Nord Stream 2. The worst imaginable role you can play in a panel is, I told you so. So this is not where I want to go to. Because the China issue is, of course, the major one and in the long term. And when we see the Xinjiang leaks, obviously it's necessary to turn around and rethink a lot of things we've done in the past. I'm very happy that there are a lot of major companies in Germany now thinking of their investments in that region. And I'm very happy that the International Labour Organization recently announced that they're going to go there and try to have the first observation mission, I think, ever in that region, because we are talking about forced labor. We're talking about slavery of millions of people. And this is not only an argument of the systemic rivalry, this is a question of credibility of our standards. If we do not address that, we're going to be weaker in the systemic rivalry. And this is one of the issues, and these are the values we are trying to bring in. But this is not a green one. This is a values of democracy. And this is a consensus within the government that these issues are highly important and maybe more important than ever before.
Thank you for that. And thank you also for your comments that you thought that we had chosen the right title for this conference, because it focuses on whether or not this is a new era for the transatlantic relationship. I was hoping that we would see each other in New York last week and I'd be able to ask you this question, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to have this conversation in the US in the not too distant future. How do you see this new era for the transatlantic relationship manifesting itself and unfolding in the months and years to come?
First of all, let me express my apologies that I couldn't join ACG in New York last week. The reason for that was my physician told me I would die if I had
That's
COVID,
a good
and I'm
excuse.
in the 7th week of a post-COVID disease, and it's some kind of complicated to just walk straightly, but this is why I couldn't come over, but I promised to come in September. Obviously, the war is changing massively, and it definitely did not start on that February 24th. Obviously, a lot of countries gonna decide whose side they are on in the next weeks and months. One of the major issues, by the way, on that is the question of nutrition. And we see that Russia is playing a very, very ugly game, letting people starving all across the globe because of the war they're doing now. They are started in Ukraine. It's super important to have a common strategy, the U.S. and Canada and European strategy to keep the community together who voted with 148 countries against the Russian aggression in the UN General Assembly. It's not obviously repeating all the time. And we see that there are a lot of countries who were against the war now are trying to dodge away from arguments with Russia. And this is why it's absolutely important to stand together in this, because if we do not do this, very recently we're gonna stand alone. It's gonna be G7 plus against the rest of the world, and we can't afford that.
And since you were talking about the role of technology before, I'd like to ask you what sort of a role you see the Trade and Technology Council in playing in trying to sort of revitalize that relationship.
It's super important, but we have to be very frank when it comes to the boundaries and of course to the limits of this cooperation. I'm not the only one here who is highly concerned of the next general elections of the United States. And of course, we have our issues when it comes to our democracies also here. So we as Europeans have to find a balance of deeper and deeper cooperation so we can contain, especially China's dominance and standards I just referred to, on one hand, and on the other hand, being strong enough to be sovereign state and a sovereign union in this side of the pond also. And this is one of the major issues, to find the right lines between these two goals who can fit together.
So, Omid, you've been a member of the German-Ukrainian parliamentary group for a number of years. You chaired it for a number of years. And so you've actually had the opportunity to travel to Ukraine a number of times. I mean, you've traveled internationally extensively throughout your career in the Bundestag and have had a knack for putting your finger on the pulse of what's going on in different hotspots in the world. I think it'd be interesting for all of us to hear from you what your take was on the situation in Ukraine in the run-up to February 24th. We saw each other in Munich on the periphery of the security conference just days before this current phase in the conflict. Did you anticipate that this conflict would unfold in the way that it has?
We had a lot of warnings, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure if it's that smart to point that out, like one president recently did. Mm-hmm. You know, look at President Zelensky and the work he's doing in these days. I think it's fantastic. The way he's communicating, the way he's serving is unique. So did he ignore warnings? To be honest, why is that important in these days? I don't know. But there is one lesson, and this lesson is that we have to take these kind of warnings much more for serious and adopt and prepare. This is why I just mentioned the Strait of Taiwan. Mm-hmm. We have some kind of similar warning. I don't want to compare it to the situation, but the level and the height of the warnings are very similar to that what we saw in Ukraine. And there's no option for Europe to say Taiwan is far away, because it's not. Mm-hmm. And of course, such a war would be a huge disaster for our economy and for our security. And this is why it's so important to team up on this and discuss.
And do you think there's that increased awareness now? Do you think that people are listening for these warning signals?
I think there are a lot of super important issues who are now
not ignored, but not at radar of anyone. We are running into a disaster with the nuclear talks with Iran, for example. And having Iran getting the bomb means a very, very bad nuclear rat race in our neighborhood in Europe. We have a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, worse than in the 90s. There is not a lot of awareness for that. If it's going down the drain, and it's going down the drain there, and Iranians, for example, open the doors there, of course, going to lead to a wave of migration of people from Afghanistan who are desperate and then try to run for not starving in their own country. And there are a bunch of crises like that and conflicts like that we are not screening in these days. And I think it's a huge mistake. But at the end of the day, it's not about my tiny size of brain to not be able to adapt to that. It's of course hard to swallow for our population also to see all of these disasters coming.
But Omid, let me push you on that a little bit, because I think actually the last time you and I had the opportunity to have a substantive conversation, it was via Zoom. It was about the situation in Afghanistan. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I heard that you were coming today and that we'd have an opportunity to talk was to what degree you're concerned that the conflict in Ukraine is distracting us from other very important issues, pushing them off, onto the back burner and even off of the stove altogether, and how you and your colleagues in the Bundestag and elsewhere can help make people more aware of those conflicts or challenges.
It definitely distracting from crucial issues, but this is why we have to come together and then discuss, because these alliances are exactly made for these situations. Just coming to Russia. Russia is this is a quote of a high level diplomat from Italy. I saw it recently. We are some kind of surrounded by Russian mercenaries, starting in Mali, going through to Syria, and ending in the Arctic. We do not talk about Mali. Or Republic of Central African Republic, or Syria, we of course, or Libya, we underestimate the Russian assets to harm us. So this is why the full approach, and it's super tough to screen all of that all the time and have it at your desk all the time, any single issue, is absolutely complicated, but it's absolutely necessary because all of these issues are entangled.
So how do you either untangle them, or how do you increase awareness about them so that we don't forget about these other topics and issues?
Or you deepen your thinking of how to cooperate within alliances. Our Italian friends are aware of that, what's going on in Libya. Let's team up with them on that even more. And this is what Annalena Baerbock is working on these days. I could repeat all of the countries that you just said. Mali, of course, our French friends are in Syria. The Americans still have intelligence getting from that what's going on in Syria, and so on and so on. And so this is about sharing of information, awareness, and capacities.
Well, thank you for making that plea, particularly to this audience and to this crowd. Omid, thank you so much again for taking the time to stop by and for this quick conversation. We are delighted to have had you with us. And I wish you all the best for tomorrow's election.
Thank you so much. Thank you.